Hey guys, it's Melanie from melaniekaham.com. Welcome back to my channel. Today, Learn to Sew video 3. We're going to get into our first tutorial. We are going to be making placemats. Reversible placemats to be exact. So I've got pink on one side, an adorable like linen dot on the other side. You need your basic supplies from the Learn to Sew supply list that I created for you. That will be linked down below. Also, you need 2 yards of fabric. Now, if you don't want your placemats to be reversible, then you can pick the same fabric. But if you want yours to be double-sided, then you need 1 yard of color A, 1 yard of color B. You also need 1 3/4 yard of interfacing. I am picking SF 101. And if you don't want to write all this stuff down, I will have a printable pattern, written instructions, and all that good stuff on my blog post over on my website. That will be linked below. The other thing you will need besides your basic supplies, your 2 yards of fabric, your interfacing, is a coordinating thread color. So whatever fabric that you pick, you are going to be seeing the thread color, so you need to pick a coordinating one. The other thing I wanted to mention with those fabrics is I like a natural fiber, like 100% cotton or a linen blend, something like that. And when you get that, you need to pre-wash it. So here's how you pre-wash fabric. Now, we need to pre-wash it because it's a placemat, right? So we're gonna need to wash and dry it in the future. And we want to make sure that it's not gonna shrink and get distorted at all once we wash it for the first time. So we wash the fabric ahead of time to avoid any of those issues. So what I like to do is take those cut edges. So we have this piece on the top, so like this fuzzy part here on the top, that's our selvage edge. So you'll see kind of that off the bolt selvage edge on the top and the bottom of your fabric. But on the sides where you cut it, you can, totally optional, but I like to do this so that I don't lose too much fabric in the wash. And by that I mean this. Just really lightly zigzagged on the side of this yellow fabric. And because we're gonna get threads, things kind of fraying in the wash, this just helps to kind of hold it together. It'll also help you practice that zigzag stitch. So the cut side, run that through your machine with a little zigzag, and then you're gonna pre-wash it. I put it in a mesh bag if you have one. If not, just throw it in your wash machine on a gentle cycle, cold water. So once you wash it, put it in the dryer, tumble dry low, and let it kind of shrink up. Once you're done doing that, you want to press it really good, and then we can start sewing. So let's jump right into the project. All right, here I am giving my fabric, fresh out of the dryer, a nice good press with my iron. Then we can cut it up. The selvage to the other selvage is going to be at least 40 inches. Depending on the type of fabric you got, it could be up to 44, but then when you washed it, it could have shrunk up a little bit. Try to line up the selvages as much as we can. Over here on your sides are not really lined up, and that's okay. There's extra. So let's just double check ourselves that we have enough. So 14 goes to here. Another 14 goes to here. That gives us plenty of wiggle room. We could even do 15 if you want to bump it up and make it a little bit larger. Fold it one more time. So then what we're going to do is get a nice clean cut here. And this is where I'm going to need a cut in order to make sure that everything's nice and straight. And the way that you do this is you got to follow the line going all the way across, because we want this to be a 90-degree angle. So we'll come down here, 90-degree angle, this black line going all the way across, because if you're like this and the line is not laying along that fabric, you're going to cut it at an angle. And then you take your rotary cutter. Be really careful with these, they're very sharp. Expose the blade. You can hold, you kind of like spread out your fingers and hold down this ruler. When you're done making your cut, put the protector, the safety protector back on. All right, throw that aside. Now what we're gonna do is take this cut edge, flip it. Okay, so we've got our cut edge here. Line that up on the left side of our mat. Let it lay nice and flat. We're gonna come over here to the 14. We're gonna cut, this will be the width. We're gonna make them this size, and then in the future, if you wanna bump it up a little bit, you totally can. Line up the 14 line with the ruler, black line going across that bottom fold, and then we want the top of our ruler up here to also be in line with that 14. Rotary cutter, Then we can put this aside, bring this one over, and do the exact same thing with the 14. So now we're going to open it up and we're going to cut off the selvage edge. So it should be pretty well lined up. Just leave it folded over. And now we're going to trust this cut line that we already made. Line that up. All right, now with that new cut, we're going to open this up and we need to make our 20-inch piece. So we'll line it up with this left side, line up our cut edge. So we should be able to go cut edge, and then it should come straight up this line. So hopefully there's not too much distortion. If there's a little bit, don't worry, okay? We're gonna just keep moving forward and you'll get better at this over time. Come over here to the 20. We're gonna line up the side of our ruler with the 20. This down here to make sure we got that nice 90-degree angle. Up here at the top is gonna also be in line with the 20 and cut. Here's our placemat size. Grab your other piece, do the exact same thing. Line everything up. Okay, so continue this for your color A or your pink, whatever color you picked. Get all 4 of your pieces and then do the same cutting technique to get your color B all cut and ready to go. And then I'll meet you back here and we will make our placemat. Here is our SF101 or our interfacing. This comes a 20-inch width. So we just need to cut it 14. And we're gonna cut it at 14, but we're gonna go a hair smaller so that we can reduce the bulk in our seam. So here's our 14 line. And I'm gonna come in 1/4 of an inch. So I'm gonna cut it at the 13 3/4 line instead. So I'm gonna trim off 1/4 of an inch here as well. Pick the fabric that you want the interfacing to go on. I'm gonna pick this one because this one's kind of a little bit of a squirrelier, shiftier kind of linen. So I wanna hold it in with the interfacing. Let's take a look. This is the wrong side of the fabric. Okay, so here's the right side. Wrong side. So the wrong side of our fabric is going to go with the glue side of the interfacing because it's going to glue into the wrong side. The right side of the SF101 just kind of looks like cotton fabric. We cut the interfacing a little bit smaller. We also do that because you don't want to have the interfacing running off the edge of your fabric and then the glue will melt onto your ironing surface. Then you'll take this over to your ironing surface and you're going to follow the manufacturer's instructions. It will have the directions on here. I will typically kind of get it into place and then hold it to really glue it down. And we want to make sure that this is adhered really well because we are going to wash this guy. Interfacing is only going to be on one side of our placemat. The other side will be just fine the way that it is. So go ahead and add your interfacing on all 4 of your placemats. Once you have your fabric with your interfacing, so the interfacing is the wrong side of our fabric, right? And then here is the right side of our fabric. So we're gonna place the right side of our fabric with the right side of our fabric. Now this pink is not obvious which is the right and wrong side. And sometimes if you picked a solid color fabric, it is not gonna be obvious. So just make your best guess, it's not a big deal. But some fabrics like this kind of cotton fabric, it's very obvious this is the right side, this is the wrong side, okay? So make sure your right sides are together. Line up those edges as best as you can. And if yours doesn't look quite like mine, that is okay. Your first sewing project is not going to be perfect, okay? And as we gain experience, you'll improve so much. So once we've got everything lined up, we're going to pin it into place. Got my clover pins, which are my favorite. And the idea that we're going to do is sew all the way around, but we need to leave an opening, because then when we flip it right side out, we'll do another top stitch and close that opening. So that's the idea of what we're doing. So take your pins and pin all the way around your placemat. Okay, everything is pinned, but I want you to use your marking tool and remind yourself with 2 marks that are about 4 inches apart from each other to start and stop at those lines. So we'll just go here. Just to remind yourself when we're at the sewing machine to not go all the way, but to leave that opening. So we're gonna start on 1 mark, and we're gonna line up our fabric with that 3/8 line, if you can find it. It's gonna be just a bit wider than my presser foot. I want you to practice running your fabric along one of these lines on your plate. So I've got my 3/8, so then drop your presser foot down. I'm gonna be sewing at a 2.4 or 2.5 stitch length. And when we first get started, you want to back stitch. So we're gonna start sewing. And I'm using a coordinating thread color with my project. And then we're gonna back stitch. So we're gonna find that back stitch button and push it. Let's go back 1 or 2 stitches and then continue. Now when you come up on a pin, make sure you remove that pin. We don't want to sew over pins. Try your best to keep along that 3/8 line, but if you don't, that's okay. This is a practice run and it is fine. It's all right. You know, we're gonna do our best. Okay, when you get down to the corner, when you think it's about 3/8 inch, you're gonna bring that wheel down with your hand wheel. So remember, cranking it toward you. Put that needle down, lift up your presser foot, pivot, and see how you did. So I came down too far. So I'm gonna just put my machine back, hit that back stitch button. Get my needle down. Pivot. That looks much better. I'm actually at the 3/8 mark, and keep sewing. You can go as slow as you need to, but remember that the machine is really good at feeding fabric through. So we've got these feed dogs down here which help to bring that fabric through, and it does a pretty good job of it. So as long as you've got your spot in place and you're just gently gliding your fingers and kind of you're not pushing it along, you're really allowing the machine to do the work for you. As long as you're doing that, it's gonna make a pretty straight line. And of course, that will just take practice. All right, coming up to that mark. Once you get close to that mark, back stitch. Okay, lift up your presser foot and pull that off. So now I've flipped it over so you can see that stitch really well. What we want to do is trim our corners so that we get a nice point. So grab those fabric scissors that you have, and we're going to cut. Don't cut the thread. We're just going to cut this corner to eliminate the bulk in that seam right next to that thread, but don't cut the thread, and do that on all 4 corners. Find that opening and flip your placemat right side out. As you're pulling it out, stick your hand in there and pop out those corners. I've got nails right now, so I can kind of pop that out with my nail. You could use a chopstick or the end of your marking tool, something not too sharp. We don't want to poke a hole, but we want that to look nice and pointy. Now what we'll do is we'll straighten this out, because when we press it, we want it to be reversible, right? So we want one side to be the dots, one side to be the pink. So we're gonna roll the seam to be laying nice and flat out. Do your best. With this, do little sections at a time. That way it looks really nice. So go ahead, do that all the way around. So see, here's where our opening is, and we want to tuck those fabrics in there and get those looking really nice too. I want to point out something real quick. Here's my opening here. So when you are pressing the opening, we want to make sure that it looks like it's going straight all the way across. If there's a little blip here where it's not folded over and pressed even, once we sew it, we're going to see that. So this one, I did this one a little bit poorly so that you could see. This is where the opening is, and it kind of comes up a little bit. That's because when I pressed it, I didn't have it pulled out all the way, and I left it so that I could show it to you as an example. It's not a big deal, and it's not super noticeable at all, but that is what we want to avoid. We want to make sure that it's looking straight. So don't just look at the part with the opening, look at the entire context of the placemat in order for you to get a really nice finish. Okay, this one is pressed and ready for us to go top stitch it. When I first do the top stitch, I am going to stitch pretty close to that fold. And we're gonna achieve that by moving the needle position over to the right. I'll show you close up in just a second. But the other thing that I wanna do is up my stitch length slightly. So when we're going through multiple layers of fabric, sometimes I want to bump up that stitch length. It allows the needle to go through it a little bit easier, and I like the look of a slightly larger stitch length. So it's still very secure, but it bumps it out a little bit. So I am going to put my stitch length up to 2.6. You could even go 2.8. It's personal preference. The next thing we're going to do is move over our needle position. So I want to be able to sew my placemat and line up the edge of my placemat with the edge of my presser foot. I feel like that is the best way to ensure the straightest line possible. And so in order to do that, I want to have a more narrow seam. So I'm gonna move my needle position as far to the right as possible. So just make sure that your presser foot has one of these elongated openings here where you can move your needle position around and it's not gonna hit your presser foot as you pull that, as the needle goes down into your fabric. Okay, so I'm moving it as far to the right as it will go. Okay, so I'm starting at the corner. Bring my thread in here. And I do want you to backstitch. So we're gonna start sewing, backstitch, just a stitch or two, not a big deal. And then keep that edge of your placemat with the edge of your presser foot and sew all the way around. Same thing as before, when you get to the corner, put your needle down, whether you have the needle down button or use your hand wheel. Lift it up, pivot it around, and see how it's doing. So you can see my fabric comes out too far, so I need one more stitch. And now we can continue down this side. Coming back around to where we were. When you get back to where you started, do another little back stitch. Okay, so we have our first pass here. And now we're going to do the exact same thing again because I want to add another little top stitch. I think it just adds a bit more professionalism to it. But I'm going to do the exact same thing that we did before. We want to line up with the edge of the foot to the edge of the placemat, but I'm going to move my needle position back to the left. So that will ensure that we have that nice edge to get a straight line, but we just move our needle over. Okay, so I move the needle over just to the left of that center point. It doesn't really matter, whatever you like. You can kind of put the edge of your placemat to the edge of your foot and see if that distance is going to work for you. And then you'll go around in the exact same way that you did for the first pass. So take a look at that stitch, really nice, that corner. So check it out. Now we've got 4 placemats that are completely reversible. We worked on pre-washing our fabric, how to cut it. We did some interfacing and learned how that works. Then we did some straight seams, right? So we did 3 straight seams going all the way around to get you that nice, good experience. We also learned about our stitch length and our stitch position, our needle position. We pivoted with that corner with our needle, did a little bit of back stitching. We got some really good basics in this tutorial. Plus we made something really useful. This is ready to go, ready to wash. So I hope you enjoyed making these reversible placemats and getting some basic sewing skills under your belt. If they don't look perfect, that is okay. Your project, if this is actually your first sewing project, it likely will not look like mine, and that is okay. I have a lot of sewing experience, and so don't compare your first sewing project to my 1000th sewing project, okay? So really be kind to yourself and make sure that you are just having fun and you're making something really useful and cool. It's all about building those skills and having fun doing it. So there's our placemats.